name is Dick Reeves, and in the late 1970s, I started a computer systems hardware and software company here with two other computer engineers. Prior to that, I came to Huntsville working for Control Data Corporation, a supercomputer manufacturer, in the late 1960s. And we were working on building radars and digital control systems and signal processing systems for intercepting incoming ballistic missiles. And in the late 1970s, the semiconductor industry was moving really fast. The first of the digital microprocessors were announced, and we figured that was going eventually to revolutionize the way things were and provide all sorts of new opportunities. So we started this company in 1978 to bring together software people and digital engineers to do new things. So we rented the office that Intergraph Corporation started in the late 1960s. 10 years later, we rented that same office, the three of us, and down on South Parkway in Huntsville, and started this company. We were all three in the consulting business at that time individually, so we just brought our cash flows together and began looking for new things to do, and they began to show up in the form of questions from a friend of mine at NASA about couldn't I produce a digital control system to control the welders they used on the external tank of the space shuttle. So the very first product that we built was for Federal Express. And this was in the day in the early 1980s when what you could buy from Digital Equipment Corporation weighed 600 pounds and was in a 19-inch metal rack. And FedEx needed a computer they could put in their truck garages around the world that weighed less than 35 pounds. We took to FedEx what you might call the original PC that we had put together in our shop. It had a color display, it had a Motorola 68000 microprocessor in it, and we had written a little bit of software to do some graphic displays. They looked at that and said they didn't really have a use for that, but if you guys could build this for us, we'd buy a lot of them. They bought 500 over about a 5-year period, and we wrote 2 million lines of code for them to talk digitally across analog radio channels in the big cities where they did not have enough communications capacity to talk to all their trucks, and eventually to keep track of package pickup requests. And over many years after we were finished with it, that morphed into what today is their package tracking system. We took that box to NASA, and NASA wanted an electrically hardened version of it and a new set of software to control those welders for the external tank of the shuttle. And over about a 5-year period, we built 50 of those for them, and they were used down at the Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans. At the beginning of our company, the day-to-day was, in my case, I had a consulting client in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was doing some control system development for them. I also picked up a contract in Washington, D.C. They needed 3 weeks of help writing a proposal for the Navy that turned into a 9-month gig. Paid extremely well, but I was out of town 5 days a week. But the cash from that consulting contract is what enabled us to develop this piece of hardware, lightweight computer hardware, that eventually we sold to not only Federal Express and NASA, but also to the U.S. Army as a computer for controlling the targets on their firing ranges. We grew the company to about 55 employees over about a 5 or 6 year period. They came to me and said, we've identified this person we think would make a good CEO. We'd like you to yield up your position to that. I was the largest shareholder in the company at the time, but my economic interests prevailed in my mind, and I made the right decision. I did continue for about a year, but I then went off and began to do other things. I had found, for example, another entrepreneur in here that I had tried to hire into my company unsuccessfully. I liked him a lot, however, and discovered several years later that he had started his own company, was struggling. He needed a mentor. I knew what having a good mentor was like, so I became his mentor, helped him recruit a board of directors and some investors, grew that company to, they had some great proprietary technology in the printing industry, and grew that company and sold it successfully to a public company about 5 years later. And that got me started in putting together some more formalized support systems in Huntsville to help entrepreneurs, technical entrepreneurs in particular, get established and be successful. That eventually led to the establishment of BizTech, the technology-focused business incubator in Huntsville. I was a committee member at the chamber to implement a recommendation of a study they had done, and we put a plan together. We hired a consultant in Montgomery to write that plan. He took it to the printer on a Friday night to publish it, went home and had a heart attack and died. And I could see all the steam going out of that project. And I was available at the time, and so I became the leader of BizTech by default. And helped get it organized, established in an initial location, funded by sponsors. I had by that time purchased a retail store here in Huntsville, a retail chocolate gift store, and I spent half my time there and the other half with BizTech. BizTech was very fortunate when it got started. It had some great sponsors in the Tennessee Valley Authority and in NASA and in the state of Alabama. And we were able to put a nice facility together eventually out in Research Park. It began to process entrepreneurs through at a pretty high rate. This was now the mid-1990s and late 1990s. It became clear to me that Huntsville's ability to generate entrepreneurial businesses was pretty limited because there weren't enough people willing to take a risk to start a business and to expose themselves to all of, particularly the financial risks that implied. One step I took to work on that particular problem was to organize the angel investors that had supported me back in the 1980s, put them together into a group. I eventually grew that group to about 75 members, and it began to invest in the worthy clients that BizTech had. So today, I have two projects going. I still continue to work with angel investors to fund not just Huntsville companies, but companies throughout the southeastern U.S. And then also I'm working to, again, support Huntsville entrepreneurs in the web and desktop app space to provide some kind of an environment where they can thrive.